It was a bright, sunny afternoon in Oakwood Hills. The sky was blue, the birds were singing, and the air smelled like fresh grass. Tim Grayson was just a regular guy sitting on his porch trying to enjoy his day. He was new to this little neighborhood. He moved in a few months ago with his old truck and a few boxes. Tim liked to keep things simple. He didn't talk much to people. He just worked on fixing up his small house, painting the wall, and planting some flowers in the yard. Most of the neighbors were nice. They smiled and waved when they saw him. "Hey, Tim," they'd say, and he'd wave back with a little nod. Life was quiet, and Tim liked it that way. But not everyone was friendly. Oh no, there was one person who didn't like Tim at all. Her name was Karen Baxter. Karen wasn't just any neighbor, she was the boss of the HOA. That stands for Homeowners Association. It's a group that makes rules for the neighborhood, like what color your house can be or how tall your grass can grow. Karen loved being in charge. She walked around with her nose in the air, telling everyone what to do. To her, Oakwood Hills was her perfect little kingdom, and she was the queen. She wore fancy clothes and carried a big notebook where she wrote down every little thing she didn't like. And from the very first day Tim moved in, Karen had her eyes on him. To Karen, Tim didn't fit in. He wasn't fancy like her. His truck was old and rusty. His clothes were plain jeans and a t-shirt, nothing special. His house wasn't big or shiny like some of the others. Karen called him that scruffy newbie behind his back. She didn't think he belonged in her perfect world. Every time she saw him, she'd frown and shake her head. "Who does he think he is?" she'd mutter to herself. She didn't like how he kept to himself. She didn't like how he didn't follow all her silly rules right away. To Karen, Tim was a problem, a big, messy problem she wanted to fix. But here's the thing, Tim wasn't as ordinary as he looked. He had a secret, a big one, something Karen would never ever guess. He wasn't just some guy with an old truck and a quiet life. There was more to him, something hidden, something exciting. What do you think it could be? Was he a superhero in disguise? Did he have a treasure buried in his backyard? Or maybe he knew something about Karen that she didn't want anyone to find out. Whatever it was, Tim kept it to himself. He didn't brag or show off. He just went about his day, hammering nails into his porch and watering his flowers while Karen watched him like a hawk. Let me tell you a little more about Oakwood Hills. It was a pretty place. The houses were neat and tidy with green lawns and white fences. Kids rode their bikes down the street laughing and shouting. Dogs barked and chased each other in the yards. It was the kind of place where people felt safe and happy, well, most of them. See, Karen made life hard for some folks. She had rules for everything. No loud music, she'd say. No toys left in the yard. If your mailbox wasn't the right color, she'd leave a mean note on your door. If your grass grew too long, she'd knock on your window and yell. Everyone was a little scared of her. They didn't want trouble, so ascending the corporate ladder didn't scare her, though. Karen was the kind of person who thought she was better than everyone else. And Tim, he was her favorite target. The first time Karen saw Tim, she was walking by his house. He was outside sweeping his porch. It was a little old and beat up, with chipped paint and creaky boards. Tim didn't mind. He liked fixing things up slowly. But Karen stopped dead in her tracks. She stared at the porch like it was the ugliest thing she'd ever seen. "That's a disgrace," she shouted, pointing at it. "You can't have a porch like that in my neighborhood." Tim looked up, surprised. He didn't say anything. He just tipped his hat and went back to sweeping. Karen huffed and stomped off, already planning how to make Tim's life miserable. From that day on, Karen was on a mission. She watched Tim all the time. She'd peek out her window, waiting for him to do something wrong. If he parked his truck a little crooked, she'd write it down in her notebook. If he forgot to take his trash cans in right away, she'd snap a picture with her phone. "I'm going to fix this neighborhood," she'd say to herself, starting with him. But Tim didn't fight back. He didn't yell or argue. He just kept doing his thing, quiet, calm, and mysterious. It drove Karen crazy. Why wasn't he scared of her? Why didn't he care about her rules? She didn't get it. The neighbors started to notice. They'd see Karen glaring at Tim's house and whisper to each other. "Poor guy," they'd say. "She's got it out for him." Some of them felt bad for Tim. He seemed nice enough. He wasn't loud or rude. He didn't throw wild parties or leave junk all over his yard. He was just Tim. But Karen didn't care about that. To her, he was trouble. She didn't like how he didn't bow down to her like everyone else did. She didn't like how he didn't try to impress her. And most of all, she didn't like how he didn't seem to need her approval. One day, Karen came up with a plan. She decided she'd show Tim who was boss. She'd make him follow her rules or else. She started leaving notes on his door. "Fix your porch," one said. "Paint your fence," said another. Tim would find them, read them, and toss them in the trash. He didn't care about Karen's notes. He had better things to do, like fixing a leaky pipe or planting a new bush. But Karen wasn't giving up. She kept coming back, louder and meaner every time. "This is my neighborhood." She'd yell, "You don't belong here." Tim never said much back. He'd just look at her with those calm, steady eyes. Sometimes he'd smile a little, like he found her funny. That made Karen even madder. "You think this is a joke?" she'd snap. "I'll show you." She started telling the neighbors lies about Tim. "He's lazy," she'd say. "He's ruining our street." But the neighbors weren't so sure. Tim didn't seem lazy to them. He was always working on something, hammering, painting, digging. He was quiet, sure, but he wasn't a bad guy. Still, Karen's words made some people wonder, what if she was right? What if Tim was trouble? But here, where it gets interesting. Tim wasn't worried about Karen, not one bit. While she was busy yelling and writing notes, he was keeping his secret safe. He'd go inside his house at night, lock the door, and smile to himself. He knew something Karen didn't, something big, something that would turn everything upside down. What do you think it was? Was he hiding something in his house? Was he someone important pretending to be ordinary? Or maybe he had a plan to teach Karen a lesson she'd never forget. Whatever it was, Tim wasn't scared. He wasn't running away. He was waiting for the right moment. The days went by and Karen kept picking on Tim. She'd stand by his fence, tapping her foot, waiting for him to mess up. She'd call meetings with the HOA and talk about him. "We need to do something about that Grayson boy," she'd say. The other members would nod, but they didn't really care. They were tired of Karen's complaining. Still, she wouldn't stop. She was like a dog with a bone she wouldn't let go. To her, Tim was the enemy, and she was going to win. But Tim, he just kept living his life. He'd wake up early, make some coffee, and get to work on his house. He'd wave to the nice neighbors and ignore Karen's glares. He didn't let her get to him. He had that secret, remember? It was like a shield, keeping him strong. He knew Karen thought she was the queen of Oakwood Hills. He knew she thought she could boss him around. but he also knew something she didn't, and it was going to change everything. So what do you think Tim's secret was? Was he a spy, a hero, or maybe just a guy with a really good trick up his sleeve? Stick around, because this story is about to get wild. Karen thought she had all the power, but Tim was ready to surprise her and everyone else. The sunny days in Oakwood Hills were about to get a lot more exciting. What would you do if you were Tim? Would you fight back, or would you wait, like he did, for the perfect time to strike? Let's find out together. This is going to be good. Karen Baxter wasn't the kind of person who kept quiet when she didn't like something. Oh no, she made sure everyone knew how she felt, especially Tim Grayson. From the moment she decided Tim was a problem, she let him know it loud and clear. One sunny day, she marched right up to the fence between their yards. Her arms were crossed, and her face was all scrunched up like she'd just smelled something bad. "Your porch floor is an eyesore," she yelled. Her voice was so sharp it could have cut through glass. "It's ugly, Tim. It's breaking every single rule in the HOA handbook." The HOA handbook was her favorite thing, a big book of rules she carried around like it was a treasure map. Tim was sitting on his porch when she shouted. He had a broom in his hand, sweeping away some leaves. He didn't jump or look scared. He just looked up at her, nodded once, and went back to sweeping. That made Karen even madder. She expected him to argue or say sorry, but Tim didn't do that. He stayed cool as a cucumber, like her yelling didn't bother him one bit. Karen's eyes got narrow, and she pulled out her little notebook. She started scribbling fast, muttering to herself about fines. "I'll make him pay for this," she grumbled. "He can't just ignore me." Karen didn't stop there. She turned into a detective, or at least she acted like one. She grabbed her phone and started snapping pictures of Tim's house. Click, click, click. She took shots of the porch with its chipped paint. She zoomed in on the creaky steps. She even got a picture of his old truck parked in the driveway. To her, every little thing was proof that Tim didn't belong in Oakwood Hills. "This is my neighborhood," she'd say to herself, "and I'm going to keep it perfect." She thought Tim's house was ruining everything, and she wasn't shy about telling him so. The neighbors noticed Karen's fussing. They'd peek out their windows or chat over their fences. "She's at it again," they'd whisper. "Poor Tim can't catch a break." Some of them giggled because they knew Karen loved bossing people around. She'd been doing it for years. If your dog barked too loud, Karen was there with a frown. If your flowers weren't the right color, she'd leave a note. She thought she was the queen of Oakwood Hills, and most people just went along with it to keep the peace. But Tim, he was different. He didn't argue, he didn't yell back, he just smiled. A small, quiet smile that made you wonder what he was thinking. That smile drove Karen nuts. She'd yell at him and he'd just nod or shrug. Sometimes he'd say, "Okay, Karen," in a calm voice, like he was talking to a kid throwing a tantrum. It was like he wasn't scared of her at all. And maybe, just maybe, he knew something she didn't. Have you ever met someone like Karen? Someone who thinks they're in charge of everything. Someone who points and shouts and expects you to jump. Most people would get mad or upset, but not Tim. He stayed chill, and that made Karen's blood boil. One afternoon, Karen came back with more complaints. "Your grass is too long," she shouted, waving her arms. Tim was watering his flowers, a little hose in his hand. He looked at the grass, it wasn't even that tall, and then back at Karen. "I'll get to it," he said simply. "No fuss, no fight." Karen stomped her foot. "You better," she snapped. "I'm watching you, Tim Grayson." She wrote more notes in her book, her pen scratching so hard it almost tore the paper. She wanted Tim to know she wasn't playing around. She wanted him to feel small, like he didn't belong. But Tim didn't feel small. He finished watering his flowers and went inside, closing the door with a soft click. Karen stood there, staring at his house, her cheeks red with anger. She didn't get why he wasn't afraid of her. Everyone else in Oakwood Hills listened to her. They painted their fences when she told them to. They moved their trash cans when she complained. But Tim, he acted like her rules didn't matter. It was like he had a secret shield, something that kept him strong no matter how loud she got. The next day, Karen tried harder. She walked right up to Tim's porch while he was fixing a loose board. Hammer in hand, he was tapping nails into the wood. "This porch is a mess," Karen said, pointing at it like it was a pile of garbage. "You're breaking the rules, Tim. I could fine you for this." Tim stopped hammering for a second. He wiped some sweat off his forehead and looked at her. "It's just a porch, Karen," he said. His voice was steady, not loud or mean. Then he went back to hammering. Bang, bang, bang. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. She wasn't used to people ignoring her like that. She started packing back and forth in front of his house. "You think you're so smart," she muttered. "You think you can just do whatever you want. Well, not in my neighborhood." She took more pictures, click, 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 her phone flashing in the sunlight. Tim didn't even look up. He kept working like she wasn't even there. The neighbors watched from their yards, shaking their heads. "She's really mad now," one of them said. "What's Tim going to do?" another asked. But Tim didn't do anything. He just kept fixing his porch, calm as ever. Karen's yelling got louder every day. She'd stand by the fence and list all the things she hated about Tim's house. "Your windows are dirty," she'd shout. "Your mailbox is the wrong shape." Tim would listen, nod, and go about his business. It was like her words bounced right off him. The neighbors started to wonder why he didn't fight back. "Maybe he's just shy," one said, "or maybe he's scared," another guessed, but deep down they weren't sure. There was something about Tim, something in that little smile, that made them think he wasn't scared at all. One evening, Karen went too far. She banged on Tim's door, her notebook in one hand and a pen in the other. Tim opened the door, a cup of tea in his hand. "What now, Karen?" he asked, his voice soft. She held up her notebook like it was a weapon. "I've got proof," she said. "Proof you're breaking every rule. I'm going to make you pay, Tim Grayson." Her eyes were wild and her voice was loud enough to wake the whole street. Tim took a sip of his tea and looked at her. "Okay," he said. Just that one word. Then he closed the door. Karen stood there, fuming. She couldn't believe it. How dare he shut the door on her? She was the queen of the HOA. She made the rules. She turned around and stormed back to her house, already planning her next move. She'd show him. She'd make him sorry he ever moved to Oakwood Hills. But Tim, he wasn't worried. He sat down with his tea, that little smile back on his face. It was like he knew something big, something Karen couldn't even dream of. The tension was growing. Karen kept pushing and Tim kept staying calm. The neighbors watched it all, whispering and waiting. They could feel something coming, something exciting. Karen thought she was winning. She thought she had Tim right where she wanted him. But that smile of his, that quiet way he handled her, it made you wonder, what did he know? What was he hiding? Was he just waiting for the perfect moment to turn everything around? Have you ever known someone who acted like they were the boss of everything? Did they ever get a surprise they didn't expect? Stick with this story because Karen's about to find out she's not as smart as she thinks. Weeks went by in Oakwood Hills and things started heating up. Karen Baxter wasn't slowing down, she was getting bolder every single day. She'd wake up early, put on her fancy shoes, and march straight over to Tim Grayson's house. She had her notebook in one hand and her phone in the other, ready to catch him doing something wrong. Now, to her, Tim was like a big puzzle she needed to solve or a bug she wanted to squash. She couldn't stand him living there, acting like he didn't care about her rules. And Tim, he just kept being Tim, quiet, calm, and a little mysterious. One afternoon, Karen decided she'd had enough. She stormed right up to Tim's porch, her face red and her eyes wide. Tim was outside, fixing a loose board with a hammer. The porch had chipped paint, little bits of white peeling off like old skin. Karen pointed at it with a shaky finger and shouted, "This is a disgrace." Her voice was loud enough to scare the birds out of the trees. "Look at this mess, Tim. I'm calling 911. This is vandalism." Vandalism means wrecking something on purpose, and Karen thought Tim's porch was ruining her perfect neighborhood. She was serious. She pulled out her phone and started dialing, her hands trembling with anger. Tim stopped hammering. He looked up at her and raised one eyebrow like he was a little surprised. But he didn't say a word, not one single word. He just stood there, watching her punch the numbers 9-1-1 into her phone. Karen held it to her ear, glaring at him like she'd finally won. "Hello, police," she said when someone answered. "I've got a problem here. This man is ruining our street with his ugly porch. You need to come quick." She sounded so mad, like calling the cops over chipped paint was the most normal thing in the world. But here, where it gets interesting. While Karen was yelling into her phone, Tim did something small, something Karen didn't even notice. He glanced down at his own phone just for a second. It was in his pocket, and he pulled it out real quick, peeked at the screen, then slid it back. His face didn't change, no big smile, no frown, nothing. He looked calm, like he was waiting for something to happen. What was he looking at? Was there a message, a timer, something secret? Karen was too busy shouting to see it, but that little glance made you wonder. What did Tim know that she did? And then, oh boy, something else happened that Karen missed. While she was talking to the 911 lady, a police car rolled down the street. It was quiet, no sirens or flashing lights. The car moved slow, like it didn't want anyone to notice. It pulled up a few houses away and parked just out of sight, behind a big tree. Two officers sat inside, watching. Karen didn't see them. She was too busy waving her arms and telling the phone, "Hurry up, this is an emergency." But Tim, he saw that car, his eyes flicked toward it for a split second, and that tiny smile of his came back, just a little one, like he was in on a joke. Weeks had passed since Karen first started picking on Tim, and she'd gotten meaner every day. She'd leave nasty notes on his door, "Fix this," or "You're in trouble." She'd snap pictures of his house and show them to the neighbors, saying, "See, he's ruining everything." She even started banging on his windows sometimes, yelling about his grass or his truck. "You can't park like that," she'd shout. Tim never fought back. He'd just nod or say, "Okay, Karen," and go back to whatever he was doing, watering plants, sweeping the porch, fixing stuff. It drove her crazy that he wouldn't argue. The neighbors were starting to talk more now. They'd sit on their porches or chat by the mailboxes, watching Karen and Tim like it was a show. "She's really going after him," one lady said, sipping her lemonade. "Yeah, but he doesn't seem to care," a man answered, scratching his head. "What's his deal?" They didn't know what to think. Some felt bad for Tim. He was quiet and nice, not a troublemaker. Others wondered if maybe Karen was right and he was breaking rules. But deep down, they could feel something big was coming, something exciting. Karen's yelling and Tim's calm were like a storm brewing. You just knew it was going to burst. Back to that day with the 911 call. Karen hung up the phone, smirking like she'd just won a prize. "They're coming for you, Tim," she said, pointing at him again. "You'll see, you can't ignore me anymore." Tim put his hammer down and leaned against the porch rail. He didn't say anything, just watched her with those steady eyes. Karen kept talking, her voice getting louder. "This neighborhood has rules. You don't belong here with that junky porch and that rusty truck. I'm the boss of the HOA and I say you're out." She was so sure of herself, like she'd finally beaten him. But Tim wasn't scared. He didn't even look mad. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, while Karen ranted. And that police car, it was still there, hidden behind the tree. The officers inside weren't moving yet. They were waiting, watching. Karen didn't have a clue. She thought the cops were coming to help her, to tell Tim off or maybe even arrest him for his porch. What would you do if someone called the cops on you for something silly like that? Would you laugh, yell back, run inside? Tim didn't do any of those things. He just stayed put, like he knew exactly what was going to happen next. The air felt heavy that day, like something big was about to pop. Karen kept packing in front of Tim's house, muttering to herself. "He thinks he's so smart," she said. "He thinks he can win. Well, he's wrong." She was so caught up in her anger that she didn't see the sign. She didn't see Tim's quick glance at his phone. She didn't see the police car parked nearby. She didn't notice how calm he was, even with her shouting in his face. It was like she was blind to everything but her own plan. The neighbors started peeking out more now. A little boy rode his bike closer, staring at Karen as she waved her arms. An old lady watered her flowers but kept her eyes on Tim's porch. They could tell something was up. "Why's he so quiet?" the boy whispered to his mom. "I don't know," she said back. "But Karen's madder than a wet cat." They giggled, but they kept watching. Everyone wanted to know what would happen when the cops showed up. Would they really care about a porch, or was something else going on? Tim stayed where he was, leaning on the railing. He didn't move, didn't talk, didn't even blink much. Karen finally stopped packing and stared at him, hands on her hips. "You're done, Tim Grayson," she said. "The police are on their way and they'll make you fix this mess." She sounded so proud, like she'd solved a big problem, but that little smile on Tim's face, it was still there. Small, sneaky, like he was holding a secret right under her nose. What was he waiting for? Why wasn't he worried? Karen was too busy yelling to ask those questions, but they hung in the air like smoke. Something big was brewing, no doubt about it. Karen thought she had Tim cornered. She thought she was the smartest person on the street, but those little clues, Tim's phone, the police car, that calm smile, told a different story. He wasn't just some guy with a beat-up porch. He had something up his sleeve, something Karen couldn't see coming. The tension was thick, like the moment before a balloon pops. What would you do if you were Tim? Would you tell her off? Would you run? Or would you wait, like he did, for the perfect second to surprise everyone? Stick around, this is about to get wild. The second Karen hung up her phone, she had a big smirk on her face. She looked at Tim like she'd just won a giant prize. "You're in trouble now," she said, pointing at him. She thought the police were coming to yell at Tim about his porch. She thought she was the smartest person in Oakwood Hills. But then something wild happened. Those two officers from the hidden police car, they stepped out. They'd been parked behind that big tree, watching everything. Now they started walking straight toward Tim's house. Karen's eyes got big and bright. "Yes," she whispered to herself, "victory." Tim was still on his porch, leaning against the railing with his hammer in his hand. He didn't move, he just watched as the cops got closer. Karen bounced on her toes, so excited she could hardly stand still. She was sure they were coming for Tim. She was sure they'd tell him to fix his porch or leave. But then, surprise, the officers didn't go to Tim. They stopped right in front of her. One of them, a tall man with a serious face, looked down at Karen and said, "Karen Baxter." His voice was strong and firm, like a teacher calling your name when you're in trouble. "We need to talk." Karen's jaw dropped. Her mouth fell open so wide you could have tossed a ball in there. She blinked fast, like she couldn't believe her ears. "What?" she squeaked. She looked at the cops, then at Tim, then back at the cops. Her brain was spinning. This wasn't supposed to happen. The police were supposed to be on her side. She'd called them, but the officers didn't even glance at Tim's porch. They just stared at Karen, waiting for her to say something. Tim, he didn't say a word. He crossed his arms over his chest and leaned back a little more. And then, oh boy, a grin started creeping onto his face. It wasn't a big, loud laugh. It was a quiet, sneaky grin, like a kid who knows a secret and can't wait to tell it. Karen saw that grin and her face turned redder than a tomato. "What's so funny?" she snapped at him. But Tim didn't answer. He just kept grinning, like he'd been waiting for this moment all along. Here's the big twist, the huge surprise that turned everything upside down. Tim wasn't just some random guy with an old truck and a chipped porch. No way, he was an undercover cop. That means he was a police officer pretending to be a regular person. For months, he'd been living in Oakwood Hills, working on a secret case. And guess who he was investigating? Karen Baxter. Yep, the queen of the HOA wasn't as perfect as she thought. Tim had been watching her, sneaky and quiet, figuring out all the shady stuff she'd been doing. What shady stuff? Well, Karen had been up to no good. She'd been pocketing fines, taking money people paid for breaking her rules and keeping it for herself. She'd been faking rules, too, making up stuff that wasn't even in the HOA handbook, just so she could boss people around and get more cash. And worst of all, she'd been bullying neighbors out of money. If someone couldn't pay her silly fines, she'd scare them into giving her whatever they had. She thought she was so smart, running her little scams right under everyone's nose. But Tim, he'd been onto her the whole time. Karen had no idea. She thought Tim was just a quiet guy she could pick on. She thought his messy porch and rusty truck meant he was nobody special. But Tim was special. He was the one who was going to stop her. He'd been collecting proof, writing down everything she did, taking pictures of his own. Every time she yelled at him, every note she left, every fine she tried to slap on him, it was all part of his case. He'd been waiting for the perfect moment to catch her, and that 911 call, it was like a gift wrapped in a big bow. She'd handed him the perfect excuse to bust her. The tall officer pulled out a little notebook, not like Karen's fancy one, but a plain one with a badge clipped to it. Karen Baxter, he said again, we've got some questions about the HOA money. Where's it been going? Karen's eyes got huge. What money? She stammered. I don't know what you're talking about. But her voice was shaky now, not loud and bossy like before. The other officer, a lady with short hair, stepped closer. We've been watching you, she said. And Tim here, he's been helping us. Karen whipped her head around to look at Tim. You, she squeaked. You're a cop. Tim nodded just once and that grin got a little bigger. Yep, he said, his voice calm and easy. Been keeping an eye on you for a while. Karen's legs wobbled like jelly. She couldn't believe it. All this time she'd been yelling at a police officer, a secret one. She thought she was the boss, but Tim had been the real one in charge. The neighbors started coming out now. They'd heard the shouting and saw the police car. A lady with a watering can peeked over her fence. A man walking his dog stopped to stare. The little boy on his bike rode up, his mouth open. What's happening? He asked his mom, who'd just stepped outside. I think Karen's in trouble, she whispered back. They all watched as the officers kept talking to Karen, their voices low but serious. She was shaking her head, saying, no, 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 over and over, but it didn't matter. The truth was out. Tim finally stepped off his porch. He walked over slow, hands in his pockets, still grinning. You should have left the porch alone, Karen, he said. Made my job a lot easier when you called the cops yourself. Karen's face went from red to white. She looked like she might fall over. The tall officer pulled out a pair of handcuffs, not to use yet, just to show her. Let's go down to the station, he said. We've got a lot to talk about. Karen's big win, it was gone. Poof, she'd thought she was catching Tim, but Tim had caught her. That 911 call wasn't her victory, it was her mistake. And Tim, he wasn't just some guy anymore. He was the hero who'd been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the perfect second to show everyone who Karen really was. The neighborhood went quiet, except for Karen's little gasps. The big reveal was here, and it was a shocker. Karen's face turned as red as a fire truck when the officers put handcuffs on her wrists. Click, click, they snapped shut, and she couldn't wiggle free. The tall officer started reading a list of charges, things she'd done wrong. It was a long list, way longer than her precious HOA handbook she loved so much. Stealing money, the officer said, making fake rules, bullying people. Karen's eyes got wide and she screeched, "This is a mistake." Her voice was loud and squeaky, like a bird in a panic. But nobody helped her. The neighbors peeked out their windows and stood in their yards, watching. They didn't think it was a mistake at all. Tim stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching it all happen. He'd been quiet for so long, but now he spoke up, loud enough for everyone to hear. Next time, maybe don't judge a book by its cover, he said, or a porch by its paint. His voice was calm but strong, like he was teaching a lesson. Karen glared at him, her face all scrunched up, but she couldn't say anything back. The officers were already leading her to the squad car. Her fancy shoes clicked on the pavement as she tried to pull away, but the cops were too strong. "Let me go," she yelled, but they didn't listen. The street started buzzing with noise. Neighbors came out of their houses, talking and pointing. "She's finally gone," one lady said, clapping her hands. "Good job, Tim," a man shouted, giving him a big thumbs up. People who'd been scared of Karen's rules weren't scared anymore. For years, she'd bossed them around, telling them what to do, making them pay fines, yelling about silly things like grass or mailboxes. Now they were free. They started clapping for Tim, a slow clap that got louder and louder. Even the little boy on his bike joined in, grinning big. Karen got shoved into the back of the police car. The door slammed shut and her face pressed against the window, still red and mad. "You'll be sorry," she shouted, but nobody cared. The car started up and the officers drove her away. The neighbors watched until it turned the corner and disappeared. Then they looked at Tim. He wasn't just the new guy anymore, the quiet man with the old truck and chipped porch. He was a hero. He'd tricked Karen, caught her being bad, and set everyone free from her mean rules. Tim waved at the crowd, a little shy now. "Just doing my job," he said, scratching his head, but the neighbors kept cheering. "You're the best, Tim," the lady with the watering can called out. "Thanks for saving us," the man with the dog added. The street felt lighter, like a big storm had passed. Karen was gone and justice was served. Tim's porch might still be chipped, but nobody minded. He'd shown them what really mattered, and it wasn't paint. And just like that, Oakwood Hills was a different place. Karen's time as the big boss was done, finished, kaput. It all happened because one quiet guy, Tim, turned everything around when nobody saw it coming. One day, Karen was yelling and making rules, acting like she owned the whole neighborhood. The next day, she was in a police car, gone for good. Tim didn't need to shout or fight to win. He stayed calm, kept his secret, and showed everyone who was really strong. Isn't that wild? Think about it. Sometimes the people who look the weakest, the ones who don't talk loud or show off, are the strongest ones in the room. Tim seemed like just a regular guy. He had an old truck, a chipped porch, and a quiet way about him. Karen thought he was nothing special. She thought she could push him around because he didn't fight back. But Tim had power she didn't see. He was smart, snaky, and brave. He waited for the right moment and boom, he won. It's like a superhero hiding in plain sight, isn't it? And what about Karen? She acted like she was untouchable, like nobody could stop her. She walked around with her nose in the air, telling everyone what to do. She thought she was the queen, too big to fall. But guess what? People who think like that are usually the first ones to trip and tumble down. Karen didn't know Tim was watching her, catching her tricks. She didn't think anyone could beat her. But she was wrong, super wrong. When you act like you're better than everyone, you might not see the trouble coming your way. So what's the lesson here? Don't underestimate anyone. You never know who's got the real power inside them. Someone quiet might be planning something big. Someone small might have a huge heart or a clever mind. Tim looked like an ordinary guy, but he was a hero. Karen looked like a winner, but she was the one who lost. Life's funny like that. It loves a surprise. Next time you meet someone, don't judge them too fast. They might be stronger than you think. What do you think about all this? Have you ever seen someone get what's coming to them like Karen did? Maybe a bully at school got caught, or a bossy kid learned a lesson. Or maybe you know a quiet person who turned out to be super cool. Tell me your stories. I'd love to hear them. Drop them in the comments below. Okay, Tim's tale shows us that real strength isn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes it's the quiet ones who change everything. So keep your eyes open. You never know who's hiding a big surprise.